Alright, here we go. Yep, another how-to. If you've been following the channel for some time now, you know that I'm a big DIYer. I use Legos, use plaster, use modeling clay, lead, make my own lures and jigs and whatnot. And a little while ago, probably more than a year ago, I don't know exactly, but I made a video on how to make your own lead casting jigs. And it was a very long video. I went through some, I replicated one, made a mold for this, cut the back off, made another mold. It was a really lengthy video, really lengthy process, but since then I've actually shortened up the process a little bit, tweaked some things, and made it quite a bit shorter. The whole process for really making your own mold for a casting jig is really not that long. Total working time, probably in the 20 to 30 minute range, but for the video's sake, this is probably going to go into that 30-40 minute area, but significantly less than the initial video. So what you need, what I use to make my own metal casting jigs, lead casting jigs that I use in at the islands and the surf and the harbor for jigging whatnot, is I use, as you know it, if you watched for a while, Legos. So I have these 4x8 or 2x12s, 2x4s or 4x12 Lego pieces. It's just really easy to make the size mold you want to make with Legos as your framework, because you make them bigger, smaller, whatever you need. Have this non-hardening modeling clay. Of course, have to have the plaster. To make the jig, I have lead here. In order to add the hooks on, add these assist hooks, I use these All Wonder split rings. These are 22-pound rated split rings. And again, all the stuff that I'm using to make this, it'll all be on our storefront at startfishingtoday.com/storefront. And once you go there, just scroll down to the metal jig area, or the metal jig materials area, and it'll all be in there. Of course, with the plaster you need the water, and in order to sink this into the plaster or into the modeling clay, you need a little razor blade just to cut sections out. But without further ado, I'll clean this up and we'll get started on making a mold for pouring your own metal jigs. Hold tight. Alright, here we go. So for this jig, it's a 1 ounce, a little over 1 ounce. When you're making, or when you're using the Legos or whatever material you're going to use for the framework that you're going to pour the mold into or the plaster into, you want to make sure that it's definitely big enough. So I've already pre-made the framework for this one. You don't want it too small. Like if I took one layer of Legos out of here and made it basically, that big, it's going to not work very well, because you need the room, you need the heat of the lead is going to put huge amounts of stress on the plaster, which lead has a melting point, or I found a really good melting point of about level 9 on the Lee lead melting pot, which is somewhere around 650 degrees Fahrenheit, which the plaster can easily handle that temperature. But in order to do so and have it done right without the plaster cracking, you need to have probably a good inch, anywhere between 3/4 of an inch and higher. I shouldn't say in between. Need anywhere from 3/4 of an inch and higher thick of each side of the plaster mold in order for that heat not to crack the plaster. So again, when I'm making my framework, I'm going to have a lot of room above, a lot of room below, and quite a bit of room on the sides to let that heat in the plaster disperse and not crack and put too much pressure on that the plaster. So this is a good enough area. You can see there's about an inch and a quarter on top, inch and a quarter on bottom, about half an inch or so on the sides over here. So now that we have the framework built, now we need to actually set or use the this non-hardening modeling clay to set this metal jig into before we actually pour the plaster. because if you put a plaster base at your first layer of plaster down and try to put this in, it's going to sink. And now you may be saying, well, if you let the plaster sit for a little bit and then put that in, it's not going to sink. Correct, but you have about 30 seconds or so to get it right. And if you don't get it right, it's too late. That plaster is already going to harden too much. You're not going to be able to move this in the proper area. Then you're going to have divots around the, you're going to have little divots around the side. So it's not going to be perfectly flat, and you're not going to make a good mold. So I recommend always using the non-hardening modeling clay first. So what we'll do, or what I do, is I'll go ahead and take this modeling clay and flatten it out quite a bit by hand first. And then we're going to use, you can have a dowel. I just use or a rolling pin. I just went and got this, I think 1-inch dowel from Home Depot. And I just use that like a rolling pin, like you would do if you're making pizza or bread or anything having to do with a dough. And just go ahead and roll this out. With this non-hardening stuff, it doesn't get super hard like a rock, as if you're baking it like a baking clay, like for making pottery or whatnot. But what you will find is it does get really stiff. So when it's really cold, it does take a lot of effort to flatten it out. So what I do is I take it and I have the microwave that I use for cooking or heating up the plastisol for making my soft plastic lures. So I'll take that and I'll heat this up, depending on the temperature, heat it up for probably a minute and a half, just to get it loosened up or softened up enough to make this process a bit easier. Okay, now the thickness that you want this modeling clay is going to be 100% dependent on the thickness of the jig you're trying to cast. Okay, so if you look here, we got a thick portion right in the back here. It's probably about 1/3 of an inch thick. And when you're sinking this jig, or any jig you're trying to mold, when you're sinking into the modeling clay, it's going to go halfway in. So half of this is going to go into the modeling clay, half it's going to be sticking out. So when you pour the plaster, you're only pouring it on the top half, and then as that dries, you're going to pull it out, flip it over, and then you're going to pour the other part of the plaster on top to make the second half of the mold. But again, in order to do that, the first step is sinking this into this non-hardening modeling clay. And what you want to do is you then take your framework, when you flatten this enough, when you think you flatten it enough, you want to make sure that the inside of your framework is well inside the outside of the modeling clay. So as you can see, if I center this, plenty of room here, modeling clay there, and there, and in these 4 corners. So we're good here. So the size is right. So now all I'm going to do is push on the inside border of the Legos to make an imprint on the modeling clay, right? Again, it doesn't have to be all the way in, just has to be enough to make an imprint. So now that I've pushed that in enough, now I'm going to go ahead and remove this framework out. And again, all you need is a little bit of area to see. There's the inside of this Lego framework. And all we're going to do now is take the razor blade and cut along this line, the inside border, okay? And cut all the rest of this out of there. And again, just a reminder, it doesn't have to be perfect, just has to be enough to fill the inside of this. So it doesn't have to be straight lines. Do as close to straight lines as possible, but it doesn't have to be. And you want to actually have a little bit of room, so you want to cut on the kind of the outside of that line, because when you put this back into this framework, you want it snug, you want it to be really tight against these inside edges. So now that we've cut that, to make it easy on myself before I put it back in, I'm going to take this lure, or the jig that you're going to be modeling or molding, and you're going to place that right in the middle. So about right there. Push it down just a little bit, And then I'm going to take my razor blade and I'm going to trace a line around it. We're just under it. Okay, there. Then another one on the bottom side. Okay. And now you're just going to take the knife and go right under it to the middle, because we're going to cut this slice out. Cut this right along this line now. Okay, not deep. You want to go probably at like a 45-degree angle. And just enough to get this piece out. Okay, again, doesn't have to be perfect, and I'll show you why. It just needs to be relatively close. Okay, so now I'm gonna smooth that down. Actually, it was this way. Okay, smooth that down a little bit. Okay, now I'm gonna take a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit of petroleum oil here. And I'm gonna put it on the bottom part that goes back into the modeling clay. This is just to prevent it from sticking in the modeling clay. Not that it's gonna stick in there. Even if it did, it's not gonna be that bad, but I just do it for precautionary measures. Okay, so now go ahead and put that back down. And now, like I said, you're going to push it all the way to where half the jig is in the modeling clay and half of it is above it. So all I'm doing now is pushing it down bit by bit and making sure that the modeling clay is smooth against the bottom. And don't worry, once you start doing this on your own, it's a lot faster process than me doing this and explaining it. Again, just as an FYI. So you see how the eye here and the eye here isn't quite in the modeling clay? Now what I need to do is just push it down. So you want to make sure that half that eye is sunk in there, okay? So now, hopefully you can see it. I'll bend this down just a little bit. But now you can see that that eye right there is halfway into the modeling clay. This one, not yet. So I'll go ahead and keep pushing down on this one. Again, remember, this is a wider part of the jig than this, so this is going to be a little bit harder to get down. Okay, so now that's halfway in. Okay, that's great. But now, see how there's these shadows here? There's a shadow there. That means that the modeling clay is kind of folding up because we pushed it in. So now all you gotta do is just take a screwdriver or something small and smooth this out. Don't push hard, it's just, again, enough just to get that fold flat. Okay, this kind of came up a little bit right here, so I'll go ahead and push that back down a little bit, make sure that that's only halfway in. Okay, see how that's flat now? Here, let me do a better view of it. Actually, this is still a little bit high right here. Trim a little bit of this modeling clay off. Again, I try to do as perfect as possible, but it doesn't have to be. It just has to be functional. It has to just, all you want it to do is purpose is just catch fish. And even if it's not perfect, it's going to catch fish. Okay, so there you go. That's halfway in. That's done. So let's switch it to the bottom. A little bit of a high spot right there, so I'll go ahead and pull this little mini screwdriver. And again, this is just like a sunglass or a glasses repair screwdriver. Nothing fancy. Go ahead and pull that around, flatten this a bit. Take a look at it. Still a little bit too high. Take a little bit more pressure to get that out of there. Okay, that should work. Okay, so everything's about halfway in. All solid, good there. Flatten that down just a hair. Perfect. Now, I'm going to go ahead and open this framework up at the end, slide this in, and you see how there's space right down here. right? That's what we don't want. So I'm going to take that out. I'm going to push this against it to straighten this line here. I'm going to put it back in. And now push that modeling clay all the way up against the Legos. Try not to mess with the eye here that you just flattened or just secured in there. But get this modeling clay all the way up against in these corners so the plaster doesn't leak through. Okay? That's down there good. Alright, perfect. And then, as you see, this doesn't fit, which is good. That means it's tight. So now I'm going to go ahead and squeeze this tight. Squeeze these two Legos top to bottom. Get this inserted in here. Stick that Lego down there. Make sure it's secured. Okay, we're secured there. Look, see how tight that is? That's what it's supposed to be. That's how we're supposed to have it. Make sure that modeling clay is pressed up against those Legos. Okay, perfect. Not perfect, good enough. So now the next part, well, there's one or two things you can do first. One, you can either add the petroleum jelly to the top so the plaster doesn't stick to it, or you can make your funnel. I'm going to make the funnel first. So just take some of the leftover modeling clay. I always roll it into a ball first, and then we're going to make the funnel for pouring the lead down into it. So I basically make a square triangle with the flat bottom. You see, that's just about right, actually. It's a little big. Okay. But you get the idea. Here, I'll show you. So there's the idea. It's a funnel. That's going to basically be my pour spout for the lead. Okay, let's see how that looks. Okay, you can see it's a little short. You want that pour spout all the way down to the metal. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this down just a little bit to make that pour spout a little deeper, or a little longer, I should say. Okay, let's take a look at that. All right, that's good. So you can see how the pour spout goes just on top of the back of the jig, just like that. See? All right, cool. So now that that's done, I'm going to split this in half. I'm going to split the pour spout in half. Okay, set this other half aside. You're going to use that later. Okay, now you take this top half, or this first half, stick it right in there. Push it up against the Legos so it's secure so no plaster gets behind it. Okay. Get that pour spout right onto the back. Okay, see how that pour spout's right on the back of there? Perfect. Nothing else needs to be done there. Now, make sure that you but push this modeling clay funnel down onto this modeling clay as good as possible, just so you don't have too much plaster leakage into that area under it. Okay. And don't worry, once the plaster mold itself is done, we're going to be doing some trimming anyways. All right, now is for where the really important part for the petroleum jelly comes in. I use a paintbrush, and you don't have to use Vaseline. You can use, whatever store brand. And I put a good thin coat on top of the metal jig itself. Every single nook and cranny, every single crevice, every part of that jig that's going to be exposed to the plaster, you need to have the oil. It can be Vaseline, it could be any type of petroleum jelly, it could be wood furniture polish, oil. Doesn't matter. It just needs to be thick enough and not something that evaporates. Because once the plaster goes on there, you don't want it soaking into the plaster, because this is the separating agent. This is what makes it so where the plaster doesn't stick, doesn't harden and stick onto the jig, because if it does, you're going to separate it and it's just going to crack. And this is just going to be basic. When I start making my first molds of something, I use just basic like DAP plaster of Paris. In case something goes bad, it's not very costly. after you've made a few and you find one that you want to have as your new control, I would get the Perfect Cast. That's what it was, Perfect Cast. And you can get that on Amazon. So that's all done. Again, you don't need a lot. You just need enough to cover it. I spent way too much time putting that on just because I was talking through the process. But that's all done. Now we need to add the layers up. I'd say at least 2 layers of Legos, because when we pour the plaster in, again, we want the top and bottom, or the sides, each side of the plaster mold to be about roughly 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick. So I'm going to go ahead and add these Lego pieces in now. But that's good enough. Like I said, about 1 1/8 inch, 1 1/4. So now the plaster is ready. So on a jig this size, or mold this size, I use these, just a plastic measuring cup. So for me, I use about a cup. I just know that for the volume that I need, I use a cup. And if I pour too much and there's a lot left over, or I'm sorry, not pour too much. If there's some left over, it's okay. It's really cheap. Then you got to have your water mixture. And in terms of how much to use, just think about it, common sense wise. You need it to be liquid enough or fluid enough to go into these eyes, right? You want it to be fluid enough to go into these eyes, but you don't want it to be super fluid to where it doesn't dry hard, because especially with pouring lead, you need it to be very dense. You need that heat to be able to be absorbed and not crack, so you need to have very dense. So I'll show you what I do to make sure it's in the eyes, and then we'll go from there. All right, so got my mixing stick. Now I'm gonna go ahead and I just got a little plastic cup of water. I'm gonna go ahead and pour this in now. You can pour the powder into the water. I pour the water into the powder, whatever. People are gonna get mad at me saying I'm doing it wrong, and I don't care. This is how I do it. It works for me. So when you're mixing it, again, start slow, because you can't see it, but there's kind of like powder, really fine grade powder floating around once you start mixing it. So I should be wearing a mask right now just so it doesn't get into my sinuses and whatever, but I'm kind of blowing it away so it doesn't get in me and talk at the same time. Whatever. All right, so you can see it's really thick right here. Just gonna, again, mix it. I can already tell I'm gonna need a little more water in here. That's natural. Always want to do less than too much right away. So getting it all mixed, make sure to get the edges everywhere. You can see bubbles starting. Don't worry about those. That'll get handled a little bit as we go through the process. So this is just slightly too thick for me right now. So I'm gonna add a little more water, not a lot, just to loosen it up a little bit. Okay, when it looks like it's super thick and not really moving, but if you start pouring and it flows nicely, that's exactly how I want it. Okay, so I've mixed it thoroughly. There's no powder, no leftover powder on the bottom. Looks good to go. Okay, so I'm gonna wipe some of this off the stir stick, set that down. Before I pour, I am going to kind of vibrate this or shake this onto the tabletop just to get some of the bubbles up, because the last thing you want is bubble to go into or onto the mold, or I'm sorry, onto the jig itself, because that'll create a void, and the lead, when you pour it, that'll stick in there as well, so you don't want that. But you can see there's some bubble back in there. That's natural because I'm holding it this way, so all the air is going to go up, but that looks pretty good for now. So I'm going to go ahead and pour this. Oops, almost forgot. So before I do that, I'm going to take some on the stir stick. I'm going to put it directly into the eye and into all the crevices. That way I know for sure it's in there and it doesn't miss due to an air bubble or something. So go ahead and first bit in there with the stir stick, so you know it's covered right. Okay, excellent. Now I'll go ahead and pour the rest. Okay. Like I said, for the size mold that I'm using, 1 cup was going to be perfect. Okay, so that's done. I'll set that aside for a moment. And don't forget, after you use, or unless you're using a disposable cup, get this poured, kind of shake it down, make sure you're good enough on the amount. And then you're going to want to go rinse this out quickly. Otherwise, in about 45 seconds to a minute, that's going to be too hard. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure this is enough volume. Okay, that's enough volume. I'm going to go rinse that, and then we'll be back out here to make sure that there's no air bubbles. Hold tight. All right, here we go. So now that there's enough volume in here, now I'm gonna, you can, if you have like a vibrating little pad or something, I've seen, or someone's commented that there's vibrating pads you can use, or whatever, you can use that. I just simply shake it on the bottom, shake it on the tabletop, worktop, just for a little while. Little bubbles here, little bubbles there, nothing too major. Just want to get all the big ones out is all you want to pay attention to and make sure of. But when I was mixing, I did a good job already to make sure those were out. So I shouldn't have a problem here. One right there, not too big. It's the biggest one yet. I think we're good. All right. So, last but not least for this part, it's not hugely important, but I just want to make sure that it's level. So, we're not quite level there. So, I'd take like a shim of some sort of screwdriver, whatever. Just put it on there just to make sure that it's level. Not a little too much. All right, see, that's level. All right, so now let that sit for probably a good, the box or the bag's gonna say for probably about 30-45 minutes, and you're good. I let it go for about an hour, hour and a half, or you know, whenever I get to it. But I'll be back probably about an hour, hour and a half, and we'll separate this, see what it looks like, and continue the process. All right, here we go. It has been an hour and 10 minutes. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we got here. Take this baby apart. So go ahead and start by removing one side of these Legos. Alright, cool. Now I can go ahead and slide this right out. Open that a little bit. Boom, there we go. Set this aside, we're still going to need that. Alright, edges look good. All looks good. I'm going to go ahead and trim this jagged edge off a little bit just so it doesn't chip when it dries. Alright, wipe that to the side a little bit. Alright, let's see what we got here. So again, here's the modeling clay. This is the top where the funnel is. So go ahead and just kind of separate that just like that. Boom. That's okay that the jig came out perfectly fine there, no problem. Just pull that right out of there. Put that modeling clay aside. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and take a towel. Just kind of wipe this off a bit. Get all the little pieces of modeling clay that might still be on it. We'll re-oil this before we do the next part of it, so don't worry about that. Little piece of plaster in that eyelet. Alright, set that aside. Alright. But there it is. There's the first part of it. for all intents and purposes, that's perfect. I'm not going to worry about that at all. Looks great. So we leave the funnel piece in there still, okay? Do not take this piece of modeling clay out. So now we're ready to start the process to make the second side of this. Now, if you were to put this back into the Lego pieces, the Lego framework, and pour the plaster right on top of this, two things are going to happen that are going to ruin the whole thing. One, that plaster is going to stick on top of this plaster base. And two, even if the plaster didn't completely stick, you go to put the mold, the second piece on to pour the, to connect it and pour the lead in, it's going to shift all over the place because there's nothing locking it into place. So what I'm going to do is you're going to take a drill bit, doesn't matter the size. I'm going to do, let's do 4 holes. Not even holes, just divots. I'm going to do one there, one here, one there. I might even do one right in the middle, who knows. Just depends on when I get there. So again, not deep. Just enough to put an indentation in there. Okay, see, it's not deep at all. Barely went anywhere. All this is doing, the whole point, is just to give the top, or the second side of this plaster mold, something to lock into so it doesn't move when you put the second piece on. Might as well put another one, and we're good. Going back and forth, I don't need a 5th one. So done with the drill. Okay, put that aside. Okay, now you can see you got your 4 holes here. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of wipe this out a bit just so you can clear it all out. Okay, great there, that's all set. Now what we do, now we build up the framework again. So go ahead and put this back into the Lego pieces. Okay, get this down there secured, but we're going to build 5 layers onto this piece, okay? Okay, so it actually ended up being 6 layers thick, only because, like I said, I would rather have it be too thick than too narrow or too thin of a top. So I'm gonna pour probably up to the base, maybe even a little higher than this this white base right here. So it's gonna be probably an inch and maybe a 1/16 inch thick plaster for this second pour. But you want to make sure you do this before you put the jig back in and before you put the oil on it, because as you can see from previous pours, I've got some plaster chips from when I put these in there. So I'll go ahead and blow that out, get all the little pieces of old plaster out of here. That looks good. You just kind of flatten this edge a little bit. Okay, that's all good. Now, before we can even add the oil yet, again, that second piece, that second part of that funnel, this is where that comes in handy. Okay, so you're going to take your jig, right? We're going to take the oil, we're going to oil the bottom again. See that side? So oil the bottom again, just to make sure that nothing happens. No, in case plaster for some reason does get in there, it doesn't stick to it. But again, if you do it right, there's no worry, it's not going to happen. All right, so that's oiled. Go ahead and put this right back in here. Okay, good deal there. That's stuck all the way in there tight. Okay, now I'll go ahead and take that other piece of funnel and put that right on top of the other piece that you had in there that was already poured on, and get that snugged in there. Go ahead and get your whatever oil you're using and coat. Again, not a thick coat, but just enough to cover all the cracks and crevices. Cover the entire back, make sure that's got a good layer on it. Do this belly area, do the around the whole eye. So I'm kind of taking the brush and twisting it, getting it into every little bit of that eye. Same with the metal piece you're doing over here, the eyelet that you're gonna hook your either tie your line to, or I use clips. So do that. Get this crevice, and you're gonna now use the oil and get every part of the plaster. This is the separating agent again. So take the brush, get it in these holes. So if you don't use this oil or a separating agent of some sort on this plaster, you're gonna pour that second layer and it's never gonna come apart. It's gonna be broken, not useful at all. So we're done with that, done with the oil. Now we're ready to pour the second and final coat of plaster. Again, same thing with the first one. I again pour the water, a cup, I pour the water in, mix it, see how much more water I need, and go from there. I'm gonna go ahead and take my dowel, and I'm gonna get all the voids, all the major voids filled first, just so I know that they're completely filled and there are no air bubbles in there. That should be good. Now again, just like the first side, gonna go ahead and level this just to double check. Okay, that's level in there. So we'll let that sit for another hour or so. Come back and see what we got. Okie dokie, moment of truth. Let's see what this thing looks like. Let's get the Lego pieces separated here. As expected, that comes out smoothly. All right, again, go ahead and flatten this out while it's moist and not gonna chip off. Great. All right, that's all set. Wipe that down a little bit here. All right. Now, if you did everything properly with the oil, this is gonna pop right off. There's the split right there. Just like that. Okay. It was actually a little more aggressive than I would have liked it to have been. Get some of this off there. Okay. Go ahead and take these pieces out. Funnel pieces. Great. Great. Okay. Go ahead and take the jig out. There it is. All right. I'd say this side's definitely, let's see here. This side's definitely more, turned out better than this side, but nothing's wrong with them per se. Get some of this extra plaster out of here so it can dry properly. Okay. So, next step. I don't use a wire bending tool when I make my jigs. So you see how this is round? So perfect wire bending tool that is rounding these eyes. I don't do it. I don't use it because when it's just not something I spend my money on. And so for me, when I make my jigs, I basically have a square there. Usually it's, see if I can compare these two. Okay, so there's the original. There's the one I've already made from a separate mold. You can see that that eye is squared, where that eye is round. Because again, I don't have the tool, I don't want to spend the money on a tool, and I don't need it because it doesn't impair this. This one isn't gonna, this eye isn't gonna catch any more fish than this. And so what I do, and you can do this if you have a tool, this will do the same thing. It'll work the same way. But I'm gonna take, while this is still moist and still able to be, you know, trimmed or sanded a little bit better than when it's hard and cured. As you can see the eye right here, and this is where the longer version of this video I did a while ago, this is why it took so long, as this process was, I did something different on this process, so it made it much longer. So with this, you can see right in here that this is round. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna straighten this out. So I'm gonna straight with that, I'm gonna go straight with this, and I'm gonna create a bigger void behind this eye. So if you look closely, here's the eye part, and it fits right in there, and you can see this was round, right? The piece that fit inside the eye is right here. So I am going to just go straight and dig out a little bit of this mold back here, because what this allows you to do is not have to have such a perfectly rounded eyelet with your metal wire that you're going to use. So I'm going to use, again, I'll show you, see, I'll show when this is all done and ready to pour. This mold has to dry up, but when it's ready to pour, I'm going to use this 218-pound tooth-proof steel leader wire. And when you bend that, this makes it to where you don't have to have a perfect round eye. It can be squared off like that one. And when you open up this area a little farther back, it makes it so that way you don't have to be perfect. It can be, you know, the eye can, this can be a little longer than this. Whereas if it's round and not, this part back here is not extended further back, you have to be perfect. And it's just, it's extremely hard to be perfect. So I open this out about 1/8 of an inch on all sides. So both sides of this, both sides of that one. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of this one. I'll do that one, and I'll come back when I'm done, so you don't have to sit through it all. Now, what you want to do, again, while this is still not dry, it's still wet, you see how on this pour spout, you could see shadows. So if there's light, there's shadow here because there's a lip. There's a shadow there because there's a lip here. You want to get all of these shadows out, all the eyes out, because when you go to pour the lead, that lead is going to stick or want to grab onto anything that has a lip or an edge, and it'll chip away the mold. So I'm just going to simply take the screwdriver and get rid of any ledge that creates a shadow or creates anywhere where that lead can grab onto. So it's basically sanding all this down. Now I'll just do this one and then fast forward through the rest just so you can see. And again, another reason to do it while it's still moist is because you can kind of use your fingers where need tight spots to kind of smooth it out. But you can see how there's still a rough spot in there, so you want to get all of it out, all of the rough spot, all the ledge out. That one looks pretty good. A little bit more right there that I want to get off. All right. And then secondly, this space right here that goes to the lure or the jig is very small, right? Because we use very little amounts of modeling clay. So you want to open that up just a little bit to allow that lead, when it's going in, to flow freely in there and not have any obstruction. Because the moment you start pouring the lead, it's already wanting to cool down. So as you pour into this plaster mold, it's going to want to harden. so the more free it can flow, the better. So I'm just, like I said, opening this up just a little bit more. Okay, so that one's done there. So we'll set that aside. Before you can even pour into this, this is probably the most important part of the whole process once you're done with the plaster, is you need to let as much moisture evaporate out of this thing as possible. Because if you were to take this and pour lead into it right now, the lead's so hot it draws moisture to it. So as you pour that lead into there, it's gonna just, all the moisture that's in this thing is just gonna make this thing spew the lead. It's gonna draw the moisture and it's gonna pop everywhere. To do it properly, there's one of two things. If you live in a high humidity area, it's gonna take longer to have this completely evaporate, of course. But if you're in a lower humidity area, I'd give it 2 full days, so 48, maybe even up to 72 hours to let it completely dry out. But the other alternative, I shouldn't say but, the other alternative is to have a little mini oven, like a worktop oven. So I have a worktop oven, and I'm gonna put both of these, both sides into it, and I'm gonna, for about a 12-hour time period, I'm gonna let these dry or bake, whatever you want to call it, at about 100 degrees, 110 degrees for about 12 full hours. After about 12 to 14 full hours of drying, with them being about inch and a quarter thick sides, that usually dehydrates it enough to where it eliminates all the bubbling. They're perfectly dry and great, ready to pour. Okay, hold tight. All right, here they are. It's been 12 full hours of evaporating or dehydrating. They are all ready to use. Perfect. All right, significantly lighter. All that moisture's gone. So now, gotta do the wires. So as I showed in the original, right? Here's the original. It's round. I'm not gonna do a round one. Mine's gonna be squared off like that guy. Actually, which one did I use? I did that one. So it's gonna be squared off like this one. So this is the, again, the 218 pound, number 14 wire that I'll use for doing this. Okay, so just go ahead and take a piece at it, take that out. And the way I measure, it's nothing precise or exact, but I'm gonna go about 3/4 of an inch of wire past this spot and 3/4 of an inch past this, so about right there. So I'll mark it with my finger, about right there, cut it. Okay, now I'm going to use my pliers. Okay, where are the smaller pliers? Where'd they go? There they are. Alright, got my smaller pliers. Go ahead and bend it. About right there is good. Just bend it at a 90. Okay, see how that's almost there. Alright, that's good enough. See how that's at a 90? Then I'm going to take the pliers and I'm just going to put them right in here. I'm going to bend this tag in back towards that main wire. Okay. So you can see how it's pretty much straight. It's parallel with the other one. However, when you're doing this, as you can see with look at the round one, how this goes up and back around, so that wire comes back to inside the mold or inside the jig. That wire goes back next to itself. If I was to leave this like this on both sides and pour it, the lead is gonna not get all the way to the tail. It's not gonna go all the way to this part right here. It's gonna get stuck. So what you have to do is kind of pinch it a little bit more, okay, and get this wire to be right up against the other part of the wire. That'll allow the lead to go all the way past this section and hit right to it. So if I look on the mold, if I left it straight, the lead's gonna stop about right there. But when you bend it up, it allows the lead to go all the way up here freely, and it creates a much better mold. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and doesn't matter what side you use, set that in. Just Get this down a little bit. Pinch this a little bit more. Okay. I want the wire, the long wire, I personally want the long wire always on the top. So go ahead there. And then you can use an eyeball, you can use your finger, whatever. But when I'm doing this, I'm going to always mark it where I want to bend the wire. So I'm going to bend it about right there. Okay. So that's all done. Now I'll go ahead and take this wire. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little black mark right there from the marker. I'm going to go ahead and grab my plier. And I'm going to bend it right at that spot. Right there. So you see the black marks right at that elbow? That's perfect. Go ahead and do the same thing. Bend this wire back, make that little square right there. Make sure that wire is pinched. And again, that can be the front or that can be the front. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever your preference is. And now I'll go ahead and just place it in here. Make sure it's all fitting snug. Get that down just a little bit. Okay, so that's all set. So now all we gotta do is I'll grab the lead pot, get that up here, plug it in, and we'll make a jig. Stand by. All right, I just wanted to note something before I get this lead heated up. I will have my mask on, my respirator mask, and a fan blowing once this is melted enough so I'm not ingesting or breathing in the lead fumes. But this is the Lee 10-pound lead melting pot. It's 120 volts, 500 watts, AC only, and I usually keep it at the level 9. And then, yeah, it's Lee melting pot. It's on our storefront as well. All right, all done. A couple things I want to go over before we actually get into the jigs. So first, with the molds, you can see that there's this little piece right here, and what that's coming from is there was an air bubble that was right here, but before I poured, I noticed it obviously, and I dug it out a little bit. Same thing we did up here, because there was the shadows and you don't want the lead to grab onto anything and hold, otherwise it'll chip it. I dug that out just a little bit. That way the lead could go into it, and it simply just pulls out of the mold instead of cracking it. And then all we're going to do is sand this off, grind it down, so we'll be fine there. Two, before I even poured any of the jigs themselves, what you want to do, two precautionary things. If you're not familiar with the lead and you're not used to how it pours, I strongly recommend wearing gloves regardless. That way, if you don't let it dry long enough or you it spills on, these are welding gloves, so it spills on these and you don't have any issues. For myself, I've been doing this long enough to where I know, again, that this mold was definitely dry enough to where the lead wasn't going to splatter. And I also use these wood clamps, woodworking clamps, as you saw in the video, to clamp it shut and then hold it at a distance away when I'm pouring the lead. So again, another reason why I didn't wear the gloves. But you definitely want to use the clamps, because that allows you to squeeze it tight so none of the lead leaks out of the actual jig itself. Okay. One other thing to note, you saw that before I actually poured or put the metal in, the steel wire in, I actually closed it up and poured a non-wire jig in there, poured the lead in there. And what that was to do is any moisture that was left on the surface or anywhere near the surface of where this jig was going to be poured into, it would draw all that moisture out and dry it, so when I did put the wire in, it wouldn't bubble. So again, that was just I always pour a non-wire lead pour, the first pour in there without wire, so it just immediately evaporates any moisture that could be left in there. Okay, so that's it on the mold. Let's see here. Now we can go to cleaning this up. So you can see on both of these, you have the little high spot here where I cut that the funnel piece off. Here, same thing. I'm gonna go ahead and take some wire cutters and just trim that off a little bit. Okay. There's little pieces down here again from that little air bubble that was in the mold. Go ahead and just trim that off. Same with that piece right there. And then I'll go ahead and do that one as well since it's here. All right, good enough. Now I'm going to use a file to go ahead and smooth this down. But before I even do that, I always put, again, just like we did when we were in some other projects, I'm going to use the gloves because I don't want the powdered lead to get onto my fingers. All right, these are just about perfect. I mean, that was a great mold, great set. So let's get a little bit of the plaster out of this one. All right, so here's the original. Here's the two new ones. Here, I'll put them down, get a better look at them. All right, there's the two new freshly poured ones. I mean, they look great. Let's flip it over. But yeah, perfect 1 ounce replicas. Now we'll just paint them, finish them, and get them ready. But before I do that, there's one very important part of this whole thing. So in trial and error, these one ounce ones, let's see, how long are these? These are roughly about about 2 3/4 inches long for full length. If you're using lead, this is the longest I would do with the wire itself. it won't bend with the wire itself. The wire is strong enough. However, when you start getting into like 1 1/4 ounces or anything longer than 2 3/4 inches, the lead is going to tend to bend a bit. Okay, so that wire's, even if you use the 325-pound wire, it's going to bend. So what I did find on Amazon are these solid rods with a little tiny, I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but in the video, little tiny diameter hollow body, and that will fit. So that 225-pound or 218, this is 325, so yeah, this doesn't fit. Let's go, I think this is this the 218? No. I'm not gonna waste too much time on this, but I'll just, okay, so we'll pretend this is the 218. So the 218 pound that I use for these jigs, it slides perfectly in here, and you wanna cut this to where it fits into this body, because before you pour it. So again, what you're gonna do, I get perfectly clear, this is not for this is only when you're making larger ones, and I can make a separate video on that, but just so when you see this video and you think, oh, I can make longer ones, and then you make it and it bends, this is why. So again, you'll bend the ends, right? You'll bend one end, and then you're gonna cut this at the length of probably about 1.5 inches, 1 3/4, 2 inch, and fit it right in there. Whatever jig you're using, you just need to obviously make sure that the width of it doesn't go past a certain point, because you could see the width of this rod is wider than the head. So you want to make sure that it's at the thickest part or the widest part of the body. But again, it's going to prevent this from bending back and forth when you just use lead and wire. Okay, so now we'll get into the coloring. I'll just do one for now. You can spray paint, you can use powder paints. So if use it, let's see, we'll use, I don't know, we'll use both of these for example. So these are both, actually this is the longer one. This is 1 or almost 3 inch. This is the replica of this. So these are both spray painted, okay? And then I have the powder paints that I put on top of it. So this is actually powder painted on top of it, but I don't really use this one very often. I didn't get bit on it very well. I've gotten bit on the spray painted ones much better. So I'm gonna go ahead and show how I spray paint it and how I finish it, can completely finish this setup. All right, so here I am. I'm gonna spray the base coat. I always do a base coat of white, flat white or satin white. I don't like to spray paint in the garage because of the fumes. I don't like sniffing all the fumes, so I just do it outside. But I'm gonna do 2 thin base coats of white to start everything off with. Thinner is better with any spray painting application. So again, just do 2 thin coats and that'll be good. I'll go hang this up, let it dry for 5 minutes or so, and then do a second coat. All right, so the white's dried, so now time to do the color. So the sardine pattern is what really, sardine and the white or the white red is what tends to work best for me here in my local surf area and in the harbor. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this one, the sardine pattern. So we're gonna have a green on top, we're gonna have a red chin and a slightly yellow tail with some black dots. So I'm gonna first just do the top. This is just any green. I get this at Amazon or like Michael's or any craft shop. This is the Color Shop Cash Color Gloss Green. So just go ahead and just a quick shot over the back. That's it. A little more in the top there. Okay, that's it. That's the green. Now I'll go get the yellow and the red. All right, this is for the red chin. That's it there. And for the yellow, Shake the can a little bit. And then just a quick spray in the back. That's all it is, just a little bit. Doesn't be a lot. And that's it for the main color. So let that dry. And I'll put some black dots on it and color the eyes with a Sharpie, and then it's ready to finish. All right. Paint's dried enough. Time to finish this thing. So again, like I said, with this one, I'm gonna do a this sardine pattern that I do. So I'm gonna put some, just for the heck of it, put some dots on here. So I'm gonna go, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4. Personally, I don't think they're that important, but might as well, since it doesn't cost anything or whatever. Do another 1, 2, 3, 4. Does it work or make a difference? I honestly don't know, but I do it. And now I don't use the stick-on eyes. I just color it with the Sharpie. So I take this area where the eye was or is, and color Sharpie. Color Sharpie. Do the fish care. I honestly don't think so, because it's more of a casting jig. So it's more of a reactionary bite for 99% of my bites. Maybe not 99, probably about 90% of the bites. They're all just reaction bites, so they're either coming from the back and grabbing, or coming from the side and grabbing it as it's moving forward. So it's just, again, mostly a reactionary bite. Now, in terms of finishing, so I've watched several videos online. You can watch them too, but watch from manufacturers in Japan on how they do these, and it's very interesting. But for the most part, just so you're aware, most of these jigs are made from a silver or aluminum alloy, so it's very stiff, very hard, unlike mine with lead. But what they do is, again, same thing, base is white, and then they have the heat foil and a press. So they have the heat foil film. They typically put the jig down on like a rubber pad, then they'll put the film down, then they have a press that goes down, heat press, and has the foil stick to it. Once that's done, then they go into the spray painting part. So they'll take a blue, and they're going to spray paint this top. Then they have a screen, like a honeycomb screen or whatever, and they put that over the top and they spray it. So that's what gives you the darker honeycomb look. Then they're going to hang it, and they're going to, or by hand, they're going to have a blue, one of those very small sprayers, air sprayers. They're going to spray this yellow. The base foil is this silver kind of silver pattern. Then they have a little white piece that they lay on top. Do the same thing with both sides. Okay, and it's the same with any lure out there, any casting lure, same thing. They put the foil down there, press. That's just another brand I sometimes use. And then to finish it off, they do a spray, typically a UV spray, or sometimes UV, sometimes not, but just a clear spray. I've tried clear coat sprays. They tend to be less durable on the spray paint and stuff. When you're using foil, it doesn't really matter, it doesn't come off, and it's pretty durable. But when you're using the spray paint, I found I need something a lot more durable than just a spray. So what I'm using now is this ProTech powder paint with the UV blast, and it's a powder coat basically. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how that works. So you have this UV blast. I also have another clear coat that you can do with from Barlow's tackle, either powder coat, or again you could use the same thing, ProTech. This ProTech stuff is made by CS Coatings. This also is the lure and jig finish, but I use these for the plastic lures, the hard plastic, and use the powder coat to finish these the metal jigs. So I'll go ahead and go through that process now. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to get a screwdriver, a small screwdriver, any mixing tool. and you want to mix this thoroughly just to get it loosened up. Okay, and we're going to use a heat gun. You can use a blowtorch, but it tends to get the metal really overheated and it'll clump this. So I'm going to use this basic heat gun. Got this, you can get a heat gun off of Amazon, which is what this was. It's a Genesis 2-level high-low heat gun. Okay, I'm going to grab this guy by the top right here, and I'm going to heat this up, but just enough to get the powder, just a thin coat to stick on it, and then I'll heat that up again, get that to melt, and then I'll do another dip to get a second coat. Once I do that and that's finished, I'm going to flip it around, and we'll get the little piece of the top here that wasn't done on the first batch. So I'm going to go ahead and heat this up for just a little bit. If you go too long in one spot or use too much of the heat on the plain paint itself, it's going to melt off. So again, light heat to start with. Okay, that's good enough. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the first dip in here as far as it'll go down. Okay, and you see how kind of murky that is, or how foggy that is. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take the heat. It's kind of back and forth, and you can see, let me do this first. You can see how shiny it is up here without the clear coat on it, and foggy down here where the powder is. So we're going to heat this up to get it to where it melts and gets shiny like the head. Okay, flip it over, make sure to get to the other side. Okay, now you can see it's not, blew it right through there. Not foggy anymore, so that's good. I'm going to let that sit for a little bit. Let that cool down. Then I'm going to dip it one more time and do the same thing. So go ahead and dip it now. Get a little excess off. See, it's foggy again. Go ahead and heat that up. You can see it starting to melt and go clear. Yeah, that's that side. Same thing with this side again. Alright, that's all done. Now I gotta switch sides. So I just take this little wire hook here, go through there, grab this side. Just enough to cover where we haven't used the powder yet. That's done. Okay, let that sit for a couple seconds, 10 seconds or so. Then I'll go ahead and dip it again. And then blast it. And that's it. Then we'll go ahead and put this on the metal hanger and we'll let that dry or cure for about 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes, let it cool down, and then we'll actually put it in an oven to cure it and do the final curing on it. All right, so this is pretty much done. Now all we got to do is put it into an oven. Well, you don't have to, but instructions for this stuff say for maximum durability, hang and bake in a preheated 350-degree oven for 20 minutes. All right, let's finish this thing up. So One thing I do want to caution about is this is the new one. And this is one of the ones that I did prior. So when you have it in the oven, keep in mind it's at 350 or so degrees. And if it's cold outside, well, even if it's not cold outside but warm, it's still going to happen. So if you take it out of the oven right away, I don't know if you can see it in this shot, but there's spider cracks in this one that I did. This is one of the first ones that I did. And there's spider cracks in here. The water doesn't get in, but they are there. And this is from taking this straight out of the oven after it was done. So 350 out to whatever your room temperature is, 60, 65, 70, whatever it is. And so that quick reduction in temperature causes everything to contract, right? Does it to muscles, does it to everything. It causes it to contract. And that caused these spider cracks. So when that oven is done, just let it sit in there for, 15-20 minutes or so, and let that temperature gradually decrease, so that way when you take it out, there are no spider cracks. It's perfectly done. Okay, excellent. So now that's all taken care of. Now I'm gonna go ahead and add 2 of these assist hooks. And again, I'll have these on the storefront. The links for these are on Amazon. I'm not a huge fan of having these, having the, what do they call these? It's like bright or UV thing, whatever, flash on my assist hooks. I use the UV flash on the finish by itself. So for these, I do cut these off. You can keep them on if you want, totally up to you, personal preference thing, but I personally cut all these off. Okay, so that's all taken care of. Now I'm going to go ahead, and I like using my own split rings that I'm comfortable with. So I go ahead and I take these ones off that come with these assist hooks. You don't have to, of course, but I just, again, I like to replace all my split rings with stuff I'm comfortable with. I don't know what the split ring, I don't know what the pound rating is on these. I know what it is for the ones I use, and the ones I'm going to put on this are 22 pounds. So I know that if this were to, as I'm casting it, snag into a big bat ray or big butterfly ray, or even snag into a shark or have a shark eat, which I have had in the past, I don't want to lose my lure because I have small rated split rings on, right? So I'm going to go ahead and take these off, and I'm going to go ahead and put my 22 pound rated All Wonder stainless steel ones on, and put these onto the jig. I do put them on front and back. Woo. All right, there you have it. There it is. Get that flash out of there. Handmade replica of whatever casting jig you want to do. But yep, that's it. Plaster of Paris, basic plaster of Paris. It's modeling clay, spray paint, lead, some split rings and hooks. That's all it takes. Now, let's see if it can catch some fish. But before we do that, just wanted to make a note. These casting jigs, these are, $7, $8, $10 depending on the size. If you look at everything involved in this one, the wire, the lead, split ring, the hooks, paint, the finish, I mean, I'm sub $1, under $1 on one of these guys. So, I mean, you make the choice. But for me, they catch a lot. But you don't have to, you know, you don't have to buy name brands. You can make your own, and they'll catch just as many fish. Yeah, I don't have the pattern or the color that these do. You can get the foil though. You can get the foil, the heat foil, the press and everything, and make your own. Like I said, this is just the heat foil, spray paint, some stencil, spray finish, and some ice, and that's it. But $7 to $10, under $1. Up to you. They both catch fish.